Hi, my name is Chris Kanatsky. I'm the editor of the Des Moines Business Record. We're here today with a group of folks from the tech and innovation world, and what we're really trying to do today is kind of delve into some of the storylines, some of the things going on in that industry, and we've got our senior staff writer, Perry Beeman, here as well, who covers tech and innovation. He's going to be taking some of the takeaways from our discussion today and putting that into an article. Where the idea for this really came from is before a lot of our events, we bring in the panelists, we have them talk about some of the issues and challenges in advance of our event. And we had people comment in the past that, oh, man, you guys should just video that and let us be kind of a fly on the wall of that conversation. We found a lot of times that was some of the best discussion. And so that's really our goal here today. So I'm adjusting the camera right now, but after this, I'm going to turn it over to our panel. We're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves. You'll see Perry, he'll be scribbling down some notes. Myself, I'll be scribbling down notes as well. And we'll come back and address you at the end. So I'm going to turn it over now to Perry Beeman. He's our senior staff writer with the Business Record. He's covering tech and innovation. He's going to kick things off with the first question. And with us today is Mike Colwell. He's the executive director for the Greater Des Moines Partnerships Accelerator at Square One DSM. Next, we've got Brian Waller. He's the president of the Technology Association of Iowa. Geoff Wood, he's the founder of Gravitate. It's a co-working site here in Des Moines. And Jodi Jones, she's an Agile coach and consultant for a technology solutions company, which is called Source Allies. Harry?
So I thought we'd start and just have everyone go down the line. Mike, I think we'll start with you. Just tell me a little bit about something big you're working on, or if there's a tool that you come across that might help our viewers.
So probably the biggest thing that's going on this year for us is we're actually working on starting our second vertical market accelerator. So we started the Global Insurance Accelerator 2 years ago. In 2015, we're in the middle of the 2016 class right now. And we actually are out talking to quite a few companies about starting an accelerator in the ag tech space. And it's really, really early. We're doing the investor recruiting, which is the very first thing you do is find the people that have the money that will get involved. And in a nutshell, the idea is you go to an industry like we do with insurance. We said to the insurance companies, we're saying to the ag companies, there are a lot of startups out there that can help you, these larger ag companies, with things they're working on that you may need that you can't put the effort into right now. You don't have the resources to do everything. And sometimes it's for the greater good if it gets done by somebody outside, so that everybody's on equal footing. And where you see this the most is in things like compliance or big data, where if any one vendor does something, it's seen as proprietary. But if somebody third party comes in and does something and everybody works with it, it's seen as a community type thing. So just like the GIA, we're looking for probably 8 to 10 investors. We hope to be hiring our managing director this fall. The plan is to have them shadow Brian Hemstaff in the third year of the GIA, and then turn right around and start their class in mid-2017 for the first ag tech class. The focus will primarily be in the software, computer, hardware space. It will not be focused at all on biotech. Iowa State does a great job on biotech. That area is covered really, really well and will just be repetitive. So that's probably the biggest thing going on in our space right now.
Talk a little bit about the distinction between the two.
Between the ag tech and the GIA?
Yeah. So I'm sure you were talking about starting the ag tech accelerator and what Iowa State's doing. So just
Well, Iowa State Research Park does a great job with biotech companies. And if you think about biotech startups, I like to say they're a multiple of 10. They take 10 times as long. They cost 10 times as much. They have 10 times the risk, and they have 10 times or better than reward. So you think about some of the really great biotech companies that are up in Ames right now. A lot of them are 10, 15, 20 years in. Corporations don't tend to have that patience level with a startup. We're looking for things that are in that 3 to 5 year time frame. So again, ISU is doing the biotech really, really well. And for someone to come in and say, do a biotech accelerator, to me it just doesn't make sense. In fact, we did some research with one of the big research companies nationally and said, do we need to be doing something more? And they said, no, you've got it handled. But where the gap was more on the business side, so more on the software side, regulatory side, hardware interface, big issue in ag right now.
Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean by hardware interface? Hardware interface?
Software talking to tractors, cultivators, plows, planters, grain bins, anything in the ag space. It's kind of like, if you think about this whole Internet of Things, apply it to the ag world. And what's happening right now, if you talk to farmers, they have too much data. This is this mound of data. It would be great if they could use it, but right now it's kind of like the internet before a really good search engine. trying to figure out how to use it is very, very hard. And it's just, mostly it's there because it's very early. And I think that you're going to see a lot of applications already starting. They're working on big data and ag. I think you're going to see a lot more. And so that's just one of the areas we're focused on. We'll know more about our focus area once we get our board together. So the Insurance Accelerator is the same, but the board sets the direction. It's owned by the corporations. It's not something the partnership owns. We have no stake in the GIA. We're just the instigator. We're trying to instigate the same thing in the ag space.
So you're not looking at coming up with the seed corn hybrid. You're looking at how does the software talk to the combine?
We're looking, so
planter?
there's a good question. So let's say we may have a couple of seed corn companies as investors. We're looking for what do they need? What do they see their customers need and they need? A good example, if you know Casey Neiman's AgriSync, which is a product to help farmers get support out in the field, out on the farm. Just about every ag producer of any product or service is going to benefit if they can cut out driving to the farm and back for service. And if they can get that video messaging capability and the real-time video. So it's something that helps everyone. It really doesn't hurt anyone. It's something that would amplify and benefit the whole ecosystem.
One thing that impresses me about that is, agriculture and insurance are something Des Moines and Central Iowa do very well. And just attaching ourselves to our strength, which what you guys have done has been amazing. Is there another one that could fold off a third?
There's always something more, right? But I got to be honest with you. Like somebody said, what are you going to do next? I'm like, guys, I got a 12, 15-month project in front of me. I don't know yet. I mean, there's a list, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. The partnership's focus is work from our strengths.
Yeah.
Should we be in medical technology? No. I mean, Iowa City is a great place to be in medical technology, and a lot of other places in the United States. So why would we do that? I mean, to start from ground zero in a place where you're way behind. I don't want to make silicon here for conductors. I don't like RF chips and stuff I used to do. This is the wrong place to do it. So you really have to be smart about saying where can we add benefit. The startups that go through our accelerators benefit because the mentors are from the industry. It's like free reign on your customer base, right? You're not my customer, you're my mentor, so I get to ask you everything, and you feel really comfortable telling me because you're trying to help me. That is amazingly beneficial. The guy that runs the board for the GIA is Geoff Russell, the head of Delta Dental, CEO. And he likes to say, we're not building balance sheets, we're building income statements. Our goal isn't to get them to raise money. Our goal is to get them to get customers. So if you get a bunch of customers, you'll raise money just fine, especially in the Midwest. It's not like Silicon Valley where people are raising, Silicon Valley is really not what people think, but it's easier to raise money at the idea level here now. But here it's more about product, customer.
Brian, what's new in your world?
So, at the Technology Association of Iowa, this is our 19th year as an association. And so as we look down the road next year, it'll be our 20th year serving Iowa. And so what we're working on is a rebranding, a recommitment to really a growing industry in Iowa. If you think about when it started 19 years ago, it was a software council. And if you look at our membership now, and you look at the industry now, you see folks that are innovators and entrepreneurs like Mike was talking about, but then you see folks, large manufacturers like Kinsey, and folks like that are Hagee Manufacturing, who have CIOs and CTOs in these companies that are handling with data analytics, cybersecurity, all these big things, and they're desiring a peer network in the state. And so TAI's membership has grown, it's diversified, and so really we're looking at a recommitment to the state of Iowa to have programs, connections that really fits and mirrors this dynamic industry. So as we look down the road, we are celebratory of the last 19 years of this young industry in Iowa, but really it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work and become that national state on the technology scene.
Does that mean coming up with a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, and how do you do that when things change so quickly?
Sure. To what Mike alluded to, we have a board of directors. Who are those folks that I talked about? CEOs of technology companies, CIOs or CTOs of these large firms, and whatever their needs are for the industry is how we deliver our programming and what we need to do. I can tell you there's a desire in this state for people of CIOs and CTOs in the state to have a conversation around data analytics, cybersecurity, the Internet of Things, vendor procurement. The growing conversation of technology is now permeating companies like Wells Blue Bunny and Lamar's Iowa that are doing ice cream manufacturing. So the conversation is so prevalent, which makes our role even more important to educate and connect some of these peers.
Geoff? What's new?
What's new? We've been up and running for about 20 months now, Gravitate. It's a grassroots group of individuals in kind of the software space or the startup space or the remote space, people that work for companies all around the world, but happen to live here in Iowa. So they've decided that just because their companies in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, or I think New Zealand is probably the furthest away that we have with someone, they've chosen that Iowa's the place they live and they want to be, and they found ways to work around that. They want to make sure that they don't sacrifice the good things that come from working around other people, so they can move a space like ours to do that. So we've been up 20 months. We've grown to about 90 members at our peak so far, and are looking at other places that we can go. So spent about the last 6 or 8 months exploring a second location in Ames. There are 16 kind of similar organizations to ours around the state of Iowa. Ames doesn't have one, and I think that makes a lot of sense from a central Iowa community, of having a physical presence at Ames as well as Des Moines that would allow people to go back and forth. A lot of the ag type companies that Mike's talked about, we have a lot of those people that office with us when they're in Des Moines, but a lot of those are in outlying areas around the metro, and when they're in downtown they need a place to office. All those same people also have a relationship to Ames with all the research going on at the university there. So that's kind of the piece that's been forefront for me lately.
If I'm remembering right, you've had some sessions like at the coffee shop on Main Street names, and as far as co-working and things, right? Is that right?
Yeah. I think the worst thing that I could do would be to just sign a 5-year lease and buy $100,000 worth of furniture and just say, come to my co-working location. I don't think anybody would do it. Nobody wants to be the first one there. The reason people are passionately late to a party, right? You want to join something that's active. You don't want to be the one necessarily that starts it. So we've done 6 of them now, I think, since about the first of the year. Just pop-up co-working, we take over Cafe DM on Main Street names and just invite people to come out that are this type of person. Like, we're going to be here for the next 4 or 5 hours. Come join us, see if this is interesting to you. And what I'm really looking for are the people that come back week after week, because that'll be the base that we start from there.
How's that going?
It's going really well. I would say right now we have about 10 or 15 regulars, but we probably had 30 or 40 others who stopped in. We really happened into this in Des Moines. I didn't know this at the time, but we kind of spiritually took over for the community that's at Startup City as that was closing in 2014. The group that was there, Christian Renaud and Tej Devin, who had led that organization, facilitated some meetings and said, what does Des Moines need next? And the things that people said in those meetings were low-cost, high-density office space, place for events and educational sessions and charity hackathons and things like that, and really a front door to the community. When people are new to Des Moines or they're new to the startup scene in Des Moines, they want a physical place to go. And so I pitched the idea of that became Gravitate as a place to take over for that. And people were interested. We had 20 people that came from Startup City over with us. And so then it was kind of like, well, we have to run really fast because Startup City is closing August 31st. This was about May of 2014. We opened September 2nd because there was a Labor Day holiday in the middle. And so far, so good there. So we happen into that in Des Moines. I want to make sure we strategically do that in Ames and anywhere else we potentially go after that.
What do you think some of the differences are maybe between Ames and Des Moines? I don't know if challenges is the right word, but maybe the differences.
Well, I think that every community is very neighborhood focused, but in Ames that's really prevalent because there's not a lot of connectivity between neighborhoods. So people know the research park and people know campus town, people know downtown. Trying to get people who normally work in campus town out to downtown or out to the research park has been tougher than I expected. It's not kind of natural flow there. It's just the way that, and I went to school there, so I kind of recognize that. And there's some other logistical challenges with bringing people from Des Moines to Ames, because I want it to be one community. So if I say, people from Des Moines meet us in downtown, you have to deal with things like traffic on Duff and the trains through downtown Ames. Whereas the research park is easier to get to from downtown, but maybe other people want to be more in Ames proper. So just kind of finding the right place in town has been a bigger issue there versus when we started in Des Moines, it was kind of like downtown's where we need to be. Like we're going to go there. Yeah.
Have you thought about having it on a train?
That's a good idea.
To go by.
Do they have trains that go north? If they could go back and forth.
Now it is the rail line.
Yeah. We'll just board right here at the business park.
There you go.
Yeah, you guys have the depot to make up for that.
We've got the deal.
I'd like the concession from Mark Carpets.
There you go.
Do you see students in Ames? I would say students taking part of this ecosystem.
Way more than I expected. I didn't want to design this with students in mind because when I was a student, I didn't want to pay for anything. And all members of Gravitate are members. Everybody is at the same level. There is a fee to be involved, but we try to make that low so everybody can participate, but it's one level of people. I want to make sure that I'm not judging your idea. If your idea is great, if your idea is poor, I'm not the one to tell you that. You're welcome to come here.
Mike's the one to tell you that.
I just asked a question.
So yeah, students were not something I expected, but students have come out. I'd say probably half of those regulars are students, but they're really serious students. So they're the same people that I see getting involved in like the accelerator. Iowa State has 2 or 3 accelerators planned right now, and they're the same people I hear saying, "Hey, I'm kind of in this one," that type of thing. So it's not just the average student stopping by to do their homework in a coffee shop and being interested in this. It's somebody who's building a company, even though they're 18, 19, 20 years old.
That's a good question, though. How do any of you, Jodi, if you're working with someone and they think they know what they need from an IT standpoint, you're thinking, no, that's not what you want to do, or Geoff, how do you swallow that urge to say no, or that's a bad idea, or that's a great idea, and push them in your
I think we
direction?
should just tell them to go see Mike.
We have this accelerator and another accelerator.
Well, I think there's an art to that. There's Iowa Nice, and some of these folks don't need that in that moment. And what I think people respect about Mike and others like him in this role, they're not going to tell you what you want to hear. And I know when Mike mentors folks, he'll give you an assignment to do and make sure the next time you meet, you have done that assignment. I think that tells a lot about it. But I think when we wayfind, we look for folks like Mike who are going to tell the truth, where it's really not my expertise to put holes in their idea because it's really not my forte, or TAIs, and there are others out there who do that.
Or it may not be your place to say this is the greatest idea just as it is, don't change anything.
It's really interesting because we have a client company in Square Accelerator right now, and 3 mentors met with them within an hour and gave them 3 entirely different answers to the same question. And it's called mentor thrashing. You just thrash the heck out of a client because these are 3 really, really, really smart people. I mean, really smart people, and they all had a different plan. But the thing is to always present it as a question and not as an answer because we don't know. I mean, how many people can really say, I know, without a doubt, right? And I think the people who come in saying, I know, are the ones that scare me because usually that means they're not really kept an open mind.
Yeah, I like that in software too because oftentimes you'll find that you think you know the product you need to build, right? And you'll need to test for feedback with your customers, and it's kind of that lean startup idea, getting feedback on your product. Are they using it before you build, an elaborate product?
Absolutely.
Right?
And if you're automating something that's always been manual before, it's even worse because we all as humans just want to make the manual process automated. We don't want to relook the way the process is done. The company I was with for many years automated a very manual process, and we always fought that first time the customer said, I know exactly how I want it to work. Well, it was the worst thing we could have done because they were just basically replacing a pile of paper, a pencil, a cash bag. Well, it's not what the point was. So a lot of times you almost have to build it once. In fact, there's a web company here in town, development company, says they will never build your first website. Ever. It will not be your first website. You refuse. Because they know as soon as it's done, the customer's going to hate it. Because they're going to go put it out there and find out they were so wrong. And a lot of times it gets laid on the developer that they were wrong, even though it's their.
Sounds a little bit about what's going on in Iowa State with 3D printing because they tell people, don't say what you want, like design the part. Tell me what you need, and then we'll design the part. And sometimes they look completely different because their engineers can come up with a different solution that might be simpler. And Jodi, you have the hackathon coming up. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we just had the Des Moines Charity Hackathon back in early March, and that's one of the things that I helped co-found a few years back. And what it is, if you haven't heard about it, it's a hackathon that is community-based. And the point of the event is to pull developers and designers and business-minded people together into a space to collaborate on solving problems for our nonprofits in the community. And we have hosted the event at Gravitate the last 2 years, and it's really about giving back. So it's connecting developers from the community, might be enterprise developers, might be startup developers, people who've never worked together before, and they join together for this common cause to do good and help our nonprofits. lot of times nonprofits don't have large technology budgets, right? Or none. And they need help, and they don't know where to get found a unique place to connect those dots and do so much good.
So how many people are involved in that?
So there's a team that works on putting the event together. There's about 9 people that put the event together. And we do a call for projects from the nonprofits. And our response has been really great from that community. We've had about 30 applications for projects each of the past 3 years. So there's a lot of nonprofits out there that need help. And then each year we've had around 80 to 90 technology professionals come out to the event. And these technology professionals are giving their weekend time. So they're coming on the weekend to volunteer to give their talents back to the nonprofits. And one other interesting twist on that is we actually have the technology professionals, they have to pay to do this volunteer work. It's a really small fee, like a $20 fee, but they pay money and volunteer their time to help the community, which is just fabulous.
Should get their companies to match it for what they're really paying. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, so some of the good things that we've seen is there are a lot of companies in town that have a volunteer time off program that employees can use to spend their time for their organizations.
Do you want to talk about the word hackathon? Because outside of technology circles, people think of that word.
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, it's not the hacker or the security hacker. It's the good kind of hack. So really what it is just a short amount of time where people get together and like intensely work on solving a problem, right? We're just going to get together and we're just going to do the thing we came here to do. So it's a lot of fun, and we've had some really great success in Des Moines. We're really proud of that.
So this will be an annual?
So right now, this is an annual event. We've held it 3 times, and each time we estimate that we're doing over $100,000 of in-kind services each time we do the event. So we're on an annual cadence right now, and what our organization is looking at is what can we continue to do throughout the year, so that it's not just a once and done. We help you for one weekend of the year, and we transition the project or the website that we did, and we help you get it installed and up and running. But what more can we do throughout the year? And that's one of the things that we're focusing on this year, is figuring out what our programming or event offerings could be throughout on an ongoing basis.
I want to ask you what your perception is of the shortage of IT workers, or the availability of IT workers, and maybe all of you have something. But Jodi, what is your sense of where we are?
Yeah, I might ask Brian to answer that one if he could from his perspective on TAI, but I have a few comments as well.
Sure. It is no surprise that there's an absolute shortage of IT workers. I also know from my time, excuse me, working at the state of Iowa, that really no state has a silver bullet to this problem. And so I can tell you from the Technology Association of Iowa, talent development is something that we do every day. There is a global war going on for talented human beings. And so that is kind of a big pillar of what we work on. If that means to us having a club called Hyperstream in middle schools and high schools, developing kids to come out into this world. We've launched an apprenticeship program, an application development apprenticeship program to try to get adults to have an off-ramp into this career. And so we're looking at all of the above. And that also means going to Austin, Texas during South by Southwest a month ago and doing a job fair with 12 other Iowa companies to try to tell that technology story. And then the final piece for us is really diversity and inclusion. If we look around the state of Iowa, we see a large Hispanic Latino rate. We see large refugees even here in Des Moines. We need to start looking at minorities as IT workers and highly skilled technical folks in the state, which we know they are. We need 50% of the population of women to feel like they're a part of this. It still continues to be a white male-dominated industry nationally, and even more so in the state of Iowa. So we're trying to pull every single lever to try to fix this, and we know we can't do it alone. And we know no other state has a silver bullet, but we're working on it.
Well, let me have you fill in a couple blanks for the viewers. The Hyperstream, how many do you have to get and explain to the viewers what that is?
So Hyperstream is a club, and it's in 5 program areas. So game design, cybersecurity, multimedia, robotics, and I am missing one. But there's 200 clubs around the state of Iowa. It is funded by the governor's STEM scale-up dollars. There's 200 schools outside in the state of Iowa that are working on technology programs around those core areas. We take a member company or a CIO, CTO, or a technologist in the state to mentor that company throughout their whole year. We understand lots of teachers came out to be teachers, but they don't have the passion for technology like some of the folks on this panel do. The best teachers teach their passions, and so we're trying to get an environment where a technology professional can come in the classroom in a mentor role and work on that. So we have 200 clubs, over 2,000 students in the state of Iowa, and it all culminates on April 29th at Hilton Coliseum when 800 kids come to compete in the IT Olympics. This is our moment to show these kids who have been working on these projects that they are rock stars, to be celebrated just like we do on Friday nights in football games. So a lot of that is really important to us to develop that. We talked about hackathons. You know, our cyber defense teams are competing, they're defending a network. So you're taking kids who might have an interest to hack a network, but the whole IT Olympics premise there for them is that they're defending a network much like you would for an insurance company or Principal Financial or other companies.
Jodi, did you want to talk about the IT situation?
Well, I was just going to ask Brian a question,
Sure,
a follow-up
go ahead.
question, if you're okay. So how do you find the community, the technology community support for volunteering for Hyperstream to be like?
Sure. In the larger metros, as you can imagine, it's a lot easier. But if you look out into the rural areas in other communities, really that's the role of TAI too, is to pull out these technology individuals and to show them that there is a peer network, to let the other community members know that there are these folks doing these high-level jobs. It's challenging, I can tell you that, but you can find at a local bank that might have someone with an aptitude with IT passions, or it's in their career description. You could do manufacturing plants of the IT person there. You got to hunt, but every organization has these folks on staff. And again, that's our job as an association, to pull these individuals out and be a cheerleader for them in the industry.
It strikes me that obviously there's worker shortages all over the state. We're at a low unemployment rate. A lot of industries, whether it's manufacturing or some of the other ones as well. At the same time, I think that could be pretty cool, right? And I think there's, I don't know, I'm trying to think back to when I was a kid about thinking how you could, the internet was still dial-up then, so I'm trying to think back to like how
You had it then, you were a kid.
Right, exactly, and you made that awful noise, I couldn't sneak onto the internet.
I think part of it is like tech is embedded in everything we do, so there are less people maybe that want to specialize in tech because it's just part of everybody's job. So when you're looking at some of these high-level things, that's harder for someone to train as long as they have. A lot of people don't want to be the IT person at their company because IT is something that should just always work, and when it doesn't, you're at fault, but you're not celebrated when it goes well.
Right.
So to try to have someone train into that is maybe not as sexy as other careers that just have technology as part of what they're doing, so you're missing out on some of these things. On the shortage, what I find interesting is we work with a lot of companies, like I said, that are remote, and a lot of those remote companies build into teams here. They hire somebody remote in Des Moines, find it's a good market to hire in, so then they hire somebody else. They start to build a team around them. We've got several of those companies that have developed out at Gravitate. One of them, which is Silicon Valley based, has specifically said it is less expensive to hire at the top end of the market in Iowa, and you get talent that's equivalent to what you get in Silicon Valley, just hire here. So that, therefore, you know, they're to hire at the higher end of the market here, and it's less money than to hire maybe the middle market in Silicon Valley.
Do you guys have a term branded for that yet? I mean, it's kind of like a, you know, think about offshore and that type of stuff.
It's
kind of
we
like
should market
like
that.
employment arbitrage or something.
Right.
Yeah, but it's been going on for years, because when we acquired a company, we merged with a company in Seattle, and so we had probably 300 software engineers in Cedar Rapids and another 300 in Seattle.
Who's we?
It was Internet Technologies and NORA Data Systems. This is ways back. But so this is in the late 90s, and even then, in all forms of engineering, the pay was about 30% less across the board, if I remember right. And I think it's still that way. In fact, I think it's more of a gap now because Amazon's pushed the Seattle area so hard. But the productivity was higher here. When you measure productivity of the engineers, software or hardware, it's higher in Iowa, and the cost was lower. And so while I appreciate that a lot of Iowa companies are strained by what it's costing them for resources, the valley is twice as much across the board. And believe me, if you're out there making twice as much, you don't have anything near what you have in your pocket when you are here. So I think it's an interesting situation, and it's going to make us even more attractive. It puts even more pressure on the partnership that's out looking for resources. Brian is out looking for resources. So not only are we trying to fill our own, but in fact, we had Pillar Technologies just opened their facility here. They've already hired 20-some people, and they're from outside. They came in because they like this area. We're their fifth location.
I think it's third, but the fifth version of that office.
Fifth version of the office, that's
Yeah.
what it was. So here's a company that came here to build an IT staff, and I believe they do mostly projects outside projects. They picked Des Moines. Didn't they start in your facility?
They did. They co-worked with us for about 5 months while they built out that office, which is beautiful. Overlooking the Sculpture
It's
Garden.
amazing. They got their own chef over there. So everything's, oh, so look at the chef.
Where are they over at?
1430 Locust. Yeah.
Overlooking the Sculpture Garden.
Yeah. Drew McCollum's old office.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think all of that is good for Des Moines, and it's good competitive-wise. I think it has a little bit of an adverse effect on our startup community here because we're a bootstrap city, because not a lot of people are kind of getting the large investment rounds, like what you talked about earlier, Mike. So a lot of people are going to people and trying to find a friend to help them develop the project. But our IT staff, our IT resources in the state can make so much money being deployed that they're not willing to take on those bootstrap projects to maybe go out on the lark and build at the start. So we kind of have a little bit of a rock and a hard place as we're trying to see the startup community grow.
We have multiple groups pulling from the same community developers. Yeah. I know I get asked a lot, what's the startup community like in Des Moines? And I think there are fewer overall startups. I think the ones that are doing it are extremely serious, tend to raise more money, tend to have more money in the deal, but it's also because it's a lot harder. Geoff said exactly right. If you can go make 70, 80, 90,000 a year pretty easily working 40, 45 hours a week, not hard hours, these aren't simple, but hard hours a week and have a hell of a life beside and get great income, it's pretty hard to say, yeah, I want to throw it all away, eat ramen noodles, live with I have some that live in their parents' basement, right? They don't have their own home anymore because they're doing a startup. That's a tough choice.
This goes back to the Iowa Roots stuff, right? I think this would have been 4 or 5 years ago, but back before Startup City, back before things really kind of took off during the recession, going back to the roots of being safe, conservative, coming from that background, and that being one of the factors that maybe doesn't lead people, or when things get better, it makes it easier to go back to the company.
Yeah, I think the recession definitely helps people go out. If you're all of a sudden not employed, it's a lot easier to try something because you don't have anything else to do. But then as people went back to work, as the economy improved, we've seen less startup activity, maybe higher quality startup activity, but less in general. People, I'd say that's true statewide.
You may have just talked about this a little bit, but just to throw the broad question out there, I mean, is Des Moines friendly to startups? Is the environment good here for startups?
I would say yes, because of the access. So Des Moines in Iowa is intriguing to folks because there's access in different industries. You could come here, have a conversation with Geoff and Mike and Jodi, and probably be connected to the right industry people. You could probably be connected to the right venture capital people in Des Moines. So I think access overall is a positive environment. Sure, we can probably have more dollars to invest in the ecosystem always. I think we could see more spin-outs of the larger companies and people that may be sitting at principal, have an idea, want to spin out of that to do something. I think Jodi's familiar with that as well. But overall, I would think it's very accessible and a good climate.
I think like some of the things that we have from a community-based perspective help that as well. So there's a lot of technology user groups in Des Moines that are very active and have large membership. A couple of them, like the .NET user group and the Java user group, and the one that I'm helping facilitate is the Agile user group. And I think our membership is over 500. 500 people subscribing to our content and attending a conference that we put on and meetups that we hold. So that network is there, and if you just, if people get outside of their day job, if they're in an enterprise, and if they can come outside that job and get connected to the community, they might get engaged with some people that are startup-minded or help them with a technology skill set that they don't have presently. The community is really supportive of that here.
I'd add to that, I think it is very supportive, but I think people have to be a little cautious. It's not as supportive of the startups that have no relevance to the area as it is to an ag tech startup or an insurance startup or a banking startup. I mean, people tend to invest in what they know. And so when you look at the investment that goes on in Seattle, there's an amazing amount of investment in e-commerce in Seattle. Well, why is that? There's a whole lot of Amazon millionaires and billionaires, a whole lot of Microsoft millionaires and billionaires that really get e-commerce, and they can add something to the conversation. So I think the analogy holds here that in certain areas there's a lot of very deep-pocketed money that's interested in those ideas. They're much more conservative, and by the way, I appreciate that. I think it's better because we're not looking at all the burnouts that we see out of the valley. And somebody wrote off another $30 million investment today, and it was like a byline at the bottom of the 8th page that's a quarter. It was like a note you'd say on who wrote an article for our newspaper, your weekly newspaper out there, that somebody wrote off $30 million. And it's a zero. It went down. And it's like, well, that's not here. We're different. We're very, very different.
Do you think in the days before things like Dwala, that really wasn't the mentality here, that someone might actually live in Des Moines but be doing business everywhere? I mean, obviously Pioneer and some of those, but as far as digital business and as far as online things, that maybe I just wasn't too
Dwala hit about the time that became pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about when the idea of a cloud computing platform took off and actually started to get going, it really was 08, 09, 10 when most of that infrastructure, the first round of cloud infrastructure that was available to Geoff or me to just go light up an AWS server and buy a bunch of gigs of storage and have that. That really started taking off at the same time. I think that's when it got easy for everybody. Now, it took time for people to realize. I mean, I remember we had an investor pitch, a deal where people could pitch to investors, and Garrett Young, who owns Prison Projection in Sully, Iowa, who, by the way, is the #1 manufacturer of stage lighting in the world for television stages. ESPN, their sports center, all the lighting there. Tonight Show, all the lighting there. The best lighting in the world is built in Sully, Iowa, right? So Garrett's up there pitching this company. It's pretty early. And Garrett's an amazing guy. He's got a high energy physics background, PhD, just truly a savant. And this elderly gentleman in the audience said, well, how's anybody going to find you in Sully, Iowa? And Garrett just looked and says, the internet comes to Sully, Iowa. And it just takes time for people to get through that process. So where the internet was really getting going here, pick your time frame, it was going 5 years earlier than Valley because it was everything out there. They were building the damn thing. It's Cisco building it and some others building the switches that built the internet. So I think we're just a little bit behind. But I think everybody started to hook that about 09, 10. People started really realizing it really doesn't matter.
Mike, when you're talking about Seattle, you're talking about Amazon millionaires and Microsoft millionaires and people like that. Haven't had nearly as many companies exit or create that level of wealth, especially in technology here. I mean, Workiva's IPO end of 2014 is one of the only true software IPOs we've had in Iowa in 20, 25 years.
Yep. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when companies do IPO and then the exiting part of it, and what kind of circular effect that can create?
Yeah, a lot of people call it the virtuous circle when you kind of think this way, but the virtuous cycle. The idea being that people who make money in technology then profit from that technology and have a piece of cash, they're more willing to put that back into technology because they understand it. Whereas you talked about insurance people are deep in this town and they may support people in the insurance accelerator. If you made your money in technology and you see other technology ideas, you're more likely to maybe invest in those.
Absolutely.
But the idea is that cycle has to start somewhere. We haven't seen people get to the end of the cycle very often and then reinvest. Now there are serial founders here and people like that, but not tens or hundreds of millionaires like you would have in other places. So.
Well, a lot of our serial, it's our first generation. We're not talking about the 3 guys that started Intel here.
Sure.
And so if you look at ag, it's a great place to look at the amount of serial investing that's going on in ag is quite high. Now a lot of it's in the biotech space. It's not in the tech space we're talking about. From the information tech space, there is some of that going on there because there are way more ag startups and companies that turned into big growth companies that had an exit than there have been in the tech space. Norian was part of Pioneer. We got spun out, and we went private in LBO in '88. And a lot of people did very well in the mid-late '90s when that all worked its way through an IPO and an exit. Now, a lot of that money's in Cedar Rapids, and so was the money from Collins Avionics. And to this date, there are a ton of startups in Cedar Rapids around radio frequency chips and navigation. I was talking to a navigation startup again today because what was Collins really good at? Radios and GPS.
Absolutely right. I don't see that as often in Central
Not
Valley.
as often.
And maybe it's the type of big industry we have just doesn't support that as easily
Well, it's
as.
the density too.
That could
I mean,
be,
you know,
yeah.
you look at the valley and you say, how many people in the valley? I don't know the count anymore. 10, 15 million in the valley.
Yeah.
We're sitting here at 3 in the entire state. And the proportion that's in tech is much lower here than it is there. So we do run into a density problem.
We see it a little bit in Kansas City around Sprint and some
Yep.
of their big technology companies. We just don't really have those here.
Yes, you do.
To spin out like that.
I know one of the things we talk about internally here, and I know other businesses can struggle with, is how you know, everyone always wants to talk about creating that environment for innovation and stuff to happen. But then I think you run into this real issue and challenge sometimes. Well, who owns Blend, right? So, are there ways companies that, I'm assuming they're going about it in a strategic way, that they're retaining? I don't know. Maybe if you guys can help explain the way
I can talk to you
actually
about that very.
spin off.
So, in my company, at Intermec and Norian, you signed an agreement that said anything you made was ours. Had it related to the environment, and for some of us, we had to sign non-competes. And companies are really tough on enforcing those. There's a gentleman right now that wants to do a startup, and he just got put on the sidelines for 18 months because he had a non-compete. Who's right? I mean, the startup got held up, but the truth is, he was the CEO of another company. And his non-compete matters. I mean, he got paid a lot of money to be the CEO. Now, they let him go, but they let him go saying, here's some money, you're gonna stay with your non-compete. So there are two sides to it, because if you turn around and walk down the street to a competitor, he could ruin that company with what he knows. So you have to have some balance in there, and we are a world of intellectual property now. It's so much easier to move things around virtually. You know, I couldn't take, if Geoff and I worked together 60 years ago, and he let me go, I couldn't take the company's Rolodex with me. It'd be really obvious. Well, today, if I'm at all smart, I've already got it. You know, it's just not that hard. I mean, look at the Panama Papers. People don't protect their data, and it's so easy to get at data.
That's what I think can be that kind of catch-22, is you want to talk about having this open, innovative culture, and at the same time, I think there's going to be a natural fit. If I've got a really good idea, how willing am I to share?
So I could say to companies today, make your non-competes as specific as possible to what you're really good at. Some lawyers like to write them as broad as possible, and they're paid to do that, but you really are hindering somewhat. So,
And there's an enforceability issue with that too.
there are enforceability issues depending on, but even the idea, so let's say, to Jeff's point with money, if Geoff came to me with a startup and he's in a conflict with his former employer about his non-compete, I'm going to go, Geoff,
Yeah.
come back when you've got that worked out. Well, it may not be enforceable, but if you have been in court for 12 months trying to get it undone because they drug it out, and that's what I'm saying to companies is really specific. If it's this cube you're worried about, define just this cube. Don't tell Geoff that it's everything around the cube, everything was ever related to the cube, ever. It's like some of these non-disclosures you get. It's like, I can never talk again.
I mean, it's advantageous for the company to make it work. Right?
It
I mean,
is,
I think that's.
but if you want to be innovative.
Right.
I challenge people to say, I want innovative people in my organization. And I said this the other day at a conference. I said, I really question people that do want that, because people that are really innovative are really focused on doing the next great thing, ask really hard questions, and they don't take no well. They want to go find the answer. And yet companies don't always like it when somebody's a little bit of a black sheep, saying, no, there's a better way to do this. So you have to make the adjustment to say, I'm willing to work with the kind of people that come with an innovative culture.
I would say some companies are more supportive than others as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
We actually created a nights and weekends membership option at Gravitate specifically because people were coming and saying, I have an idea, it's not a non-compete issue, but I can't work on it with my work machine around my office. I want a
Sure.
place to go outside of work hours to totally make sure this is mine and not what the company's doing. And a fair number of people from the point businesses do that, which is great for us, but also like to provide them that
I
place.
think Area 505 gets some memberships paid for by companies so that their employees can go create their own stuff. It's more of a, it's the makerspace. But I know there are some companies that are sponsoring employees that do that, saying, yeah, we'll pay your way, go have fun. Go make something cool, and not looking for the IP. So it's becoming a benefit to have access to a makerspace.
If you put yourself in the position of the company, you're going, well, how do I retain those people? And so in other words, how do you retain those people and foster them spinning something out that I can benefit from too? So I think that's kind of that give and take, is how do you foster
Well,
them?
you stop thinking about employees as somebody that's your property.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just
They are,
thinking
yeah.
about, some experiences that I've had, and how do you take that innovative idea and make it work for the business that you are an employee of? If you, like, do you have to break off into a startup to take your idea forward? Some people are going to want that, right? Because they're driven, they have a passion, and they want to kind of jump into that space. Others might not so much, right? Others might want to be innovative within their current organization, and having the right culture in that organization is going to be very, very important, as you mentioned, right? They might rub a little bit against the culture there, and so having a space inside an organization where you can do that and kind of create that culture can benefit that organization, and they might find their internal innovators in that fashion.
When we were pitching the Global Insurance Accelerator, one of the things we said to the insurance industry is one of the many things that makes the valley is if you're at Cisco and you come up with this really cool idea for, let's say, a consumer class router, okay? Cisco will actually motivate you to go try that. And they might even give you a little bit of funding, and they'll tell you, go start your company, go have fun, and if it doesn't work, call us, come back to work here. And if it does work, maybe we'll buy it. And so that's the difference when you look at the companies, and Cisco's a big machine, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. They're encouraging their employees because actually it's a way to get people to come there. We told insurance companies, hey, look, you might get more people wanting to move here if they know there's a place to go to a startup. I can take a few years out, go to a startup, come back to the industry with way more knowledge than I had before. It can be way more beneficial. And that's very common. The serial entrepreneur that sells his or her company, Michael Ferrari is working for the company that just bought his company. Wade Arnold's working for Jack Henry. I mean, they're all working for the acquirer now. Will they stay there forever? Probably not. But look how much benefit those acquirers are getting from those people.
I think that goes along with retention of employees. I mean, you want them to be curious and passionate within their job rather than a robot within their job, and then they're passionate and curious outside. So you see workspaces and remodeling to make it more collaborative and more of a fun environment that people want to work. Gravitate's a good example of that. That's a fun, collaborative environment. You see corporate America going more towards what they're doing, and that's all around retention that I see.
Let me ask you a couple of kind of umbrella questions as we start to wrap up. So we just talked about some of these, but what do you think is the biggest challenge in this area to tech and innovation today?
To me, that's super easy. It's access to talent. It's just a critical thing. And so if you are building a company and you need something developed, or you are a company and need access to talent to build that, it's just not at your fingertips here. I can tell you large companies are tired of seeing employees go from one company to the next, and we're stealing and borrowing from each other. The companies behind closed doors, the HR people are saying, we've tapped out of Iowa State University. We're going there, of course, but now we're going to University of Minnesota and Georgia Tech and in Athens, Georgia, and we're going all across to import people to Iowa. I think Des Moines, Iowa has a quality of life thing that I know Geoff loves hearing when I talk about quality of life.
I got that from you, though.
Okay, good. We have something to offer here, and I think you're seeing HR people saying, all right, I get it that you're in middle schools and high schools and doing this long-term planning, but I need someone tomorrow. And you're seeing these folks go out and try to recruit them to Iowa, and if they can't find it, they're going to India to get their work done, or they're going to Argentina now, and other folks that are trying to build their dev shops and their access.
And so if a prominent economist at Iowa State said that he thinks that gap doesn't really exist, you'd say he's wrong?
Well, then I'm being lied to every meeting that I go to, and hear from my members there's not enough access to
So
high
you
school.
hear about this regularly from...
Absolutely.
We all do.
Yeah.
Mike, what's the biggest challenge?
His was the number one, and I'll add to is if you want that talent to come here, you've got to make this an attractive place for talent. And I think we do a good job of that. I think the Des Moines area in general is doing a great job of that, as with Ames and all the things we're doing. I think Cedar Rapids, Iowa City is trying to do the same thing. But you got to make a place they want to come to.
What do we do? What do we need to do that we haven't done?
Done a lot.
Well, maybe it goes along to you guys are kind of joking about the quality of life thing. I've heard you talk a little bit about it, but maybe expand on that idea.
nobody thinks that where they live now is a terrible place, or they'd move if they could, right? So saying the quality of life here is great is not an attraction thing, but I think Mike is absolutely right. It's more of like a baked-in thing. Like, I think back to the Ignite pitches that you did, like Zach Mannheimer talking about. We don't see that you still need a car to live anymore. Like, it's not really accessible. We don't have the bus rapid transit. We just got food trucks, and that's still a big issue of figuring out what else to, like all those things that are expected by people in other markets, when they come here and see, like, you can't recycle downtown, right? There's trash cans, but there's not recycling. I just go back and watch that 5-minute video that Zach gave. Those are all really important things that are just kind of expected for this up-and-coming, well, it's not even like the future workforce, it's the workforce now. It's what they're looking for. I think it's those quality of life things.
I think you have a good point. I don't think it's something new and different that we're not doing right now so much that we don't know about. I think you could ask a lot of the people that are, we're mostly targeting younger people, like people in their 20s and 30s, to move here. And go ask people in their 20s and 30s that live here what they'd like to see improved, and they'll tell you. I mean, as someone that's moving downtown, where's our car sharing service? Where's the cars to go? Where's the zip car? Why don't we have one? Who's out working to get that here? Probably the partnership's working on it. I don't know about it. We're a big organization, but I mean, those are the kinds of things that if I was back in Seattle, it's like, it's just part of life. There's a zip car in the street. There's always a zip car in the street. Get a car, grab one.
And to that demographic of that 20-year-old we're trying to get here, they could care less that this is a great place to raise a family. I mean, that's kind of the narrative that comes out of Iowa. This is a great place to see live music. It's a great place to see art. It's a great place to be creative. It is. Those are the things we need to start telling the story rather
We
than.
got the hottest Broadway show in the nation coming here next year.
And
It's like, they got Hamilton? There isn't a ticket in New York for Hamilton. We're getting the show. That's pretty cool.
That's a better narrative than when all your fun years are done, you come to.
I think there's a misconception, yeah. I think there's a misconception that we're not doing very many things. I look at like Nathan Ritz of the partnership, and he did 39 schools this year where he goes out and does a recruiting trip. We're all over the Midwest and the Atlantic, we're everywhere. And to these companies, I'm not trying to be negative, but it's a global competitive plan. And a lot of them haven't had to compete very hard outside Iowa. And the truth is, that's coming.
Well, they go from such a, really in a 5-6 year span, you go from where
Hard recession.
Yeah, a hard recession to all of a sudden you're in a crunch. And so
Yeah,
to have and it happened really relatively quickly overnight in a lot of ways.
I think it is forcing some of the companies to look at their own to-do list and say, do we really have to be doing this inside? I think about all the IT projects that get done. You do a 5-year after action on and say, why did we do that? And you're shaking your head. You see some of these projects as contractors. It's like, why
sort
are
of
you
in my
doing
head,
this?
I was thinking about my question or my response, and sort of, is it just numbers of IT people that are you're short? Like, we're just short people, but we know adding people to projects doesn't get projects done sooner, right? So we need the right people with the right skills and making the right product decisions about what to build. And that's when we're going to be the most effective at delivering products for our companies.
Which, by the way, is globally happening. The most competitive companies on the globe, they're figuring out what not to do.
So, just in way of, it's a fantastic discussion. First of all, thank you all for stopping by and doing this. I think we've learned a lot. Just in the way of wrapping up, and building on what we just talked about, one of the things we're always reading about is these rankings for Des Moines. The partnership certainly knows all about those and everything, right? I want to know what I asked you about the challenges, and I want you to tell me, what does Des Moines rank #1 in tech and innovation? What's the number one thing we're doing right?
Innovation? Oh my God.
Do you want to answer a different question?
I have a hard time saying there's one thing. I think
What's
that
one of them? What's a top five?
we are one of the great recipients of what has happened through the world of cloud computing. We are a hardworking group of people who always have been in the state, but all the way back to the state of Southern. And suddenly all the blockades that kept Silicon Valley companies and Austin companies and Boston, the Circle companies and the Research Triangle companies from coming here, there's no reason not to. In fact, there's a lot of reasons to do it. So to be honest, we are such a great place. I don't know if that's answered your question. We're sitting in such a great place right now.
You talk about the productivity aspect, and that's something that
People
you hear.
work hard.
You hear in a lot of the industries. They were talking about something about retail, and these national retailers come in and they're thinking they have to hire, and they're looking at unemployment rate and thinking, oh, it's going to be really tough. What they're finding is they can actually hire. They're hiring less employees because they can depend on their employees. So that's a small example of a way that we might differ from other markets in some ways. So.
I think we're really, really good at working in this community. I think if I was going to pick one thing, and I don't know how close it is to tech, but look what happened with this whole downtown reinvestment corp here, where we get a whole bunch of people that have a lot of money get together, and as a nonprofit with no intent of making a dime, put 10 or 20 million of their own money on the line, and then borrow another 80 or 100, whatever the numbers are. Here, I know you know the numbers. Just so they can resort all the property and move it around so we can make projects happen. That is not a Chicago or New York thing, okay? That's not going to happen in Seattle. It just isn't.
It's part of the challenge. We talked about the benefits you get when the large company, when you have these success stories and they end up going out and kind of just percolates. You don't have that quantity of millionaires in there. David Albert just wrote a column about this, and he was looking more at the community in general, he did something where he looked at what our growth was in terms of the people that have a lot of money in the area. And we were growing, and that was a good thing, but not at the same rate as some of the other areas. So I wonder if it's a longer term, when you think about investing in the startup scene and the tech scene, sometimes there's not that immediate return on investment, and you have to have kind of that longer outlook, right? And if Des Moines really is only now coming into a time where you can be doing some of these things where maybe they weren't able to.
I'd like to throw a little cold water on the idea that every startup is just looking for their exit. That's not true. Most people building a startup that are doing it right aren't looking to exit. In fact, they're usually the least happiest after they sold. So I push back a little bit on it's just about the exit. So, I don't know.
Brian, what are we doing right?
So I think with some of the companies I talked about with Dwell and some of the attention Des Moines has gotten over the past years, we've got over the hurdle that it can happen from here. So you look at a Workiva, a story like that, you talk about Dwell and fill in the blank. I think the narrative is there that you can do it from Des Moines, you can do it from Iowa. Not only can you do it, it might be more advantageous from a public relations standpoint. It's less, there's less noise here in the startup scene. So if you have something, you can break out of here. I think that's one major advantage. And something to echo what Mike said, really think it's special in the Des Moines community and in Iowa, where we collaborate rather than compete a lot. I know some of the organizations were working on some of the same things, and we just have an appetite to get things done and collaborate more than compete. And I think everyone comes to the table with their oar in the water for Des Moines, and that's special, and you don't get that in other places. So I think the viability of, hey, it can happen here, we have these success stories, to it's the environment where we collaborate rather than compete. It's a very special thing that we have going on.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that, just kind of the community-based events that I was speaking to, and just the ability for the technology professionals to learn from each other and grow and share their knowledge. I think that is something that is a unique opportunity that we really have done well in the Des Moines area for sure.
Geoff, you're bad cleanup, man.
Okay.
What do you got to say about what we're doing right?
When you were saying the top 10 list thing, I keep having that like Reagan shirt, maybe just today. Number one city to be a surprise number one on top 10 list is what
Yeah, that's right.
We're number one at number one.
Yeah. So I had a snarky answer, but I thought of something good. I think on the startup side, I think we have a tremendous amount of infrastructure to support people starting new ideas here. That doesn't mean they're going to be more successful than they would have, but if you want to start an idea now, all the pieces are there to help you get there. It's still up to you to execute, but they're like never before have we had this many things. So if you go from something like a startup weekend, which is an inspiration, idea generation event, to a thing like Venture School, which the University of Iowa does, which helps you vet and customer discover and see if that's a real idea or not, into something like the Global Insurance Accelerator, where you can actually execute, potentially get investment or find customers, those types of things. We now have this kind of pathway or conveyor belt of like, here's the steps to get there. If you feel like you're out on your own and you're not sure what the next step is, you shouldn't feel like that in Des Moines, because all of those pieces are there to help you if you choose to take advantage of them. You don't have to do that, but I think like we've never quite had this much supporting infrastructure for new ideas. So hopefully there'll be more coming soon.
And to this point, though, we need to add Ames to that equation, because when I say Des Moines, I think Des Moines 50-mile radius. I put Ames in there. My apologies. I don't think about Ames, Ankeny, West Des Moines, Fly, they're all one to me. You've got the Ag Tech or the Ag Incubator Program running out of ISU. They're running an accelerator this summer. You've got a couple other things going accelerator over there. They're all working together. They're working on the Cultivation Corridor now, which is a regional initiative. I would say this region is the best in the state at working together by far. There are other regions trying, but more is getting done here, just to be frank about it.
That's the structure question.
I don't know that I would say that more is being done here. I think it may be bigger here, but I'm often envious of what's going on in Eastern Iowa as well. I think there's a lot of things we can learn from what Cedar Rapids and Iowa City are doing too. A lot of things I think they did a little bit after us, and they saw some of the things we didn't do so well, and they learned a lot. And so now it's our turn, and I think we're doing this to learn from some of their things. I think there's a lot of give and take. I still think we also need to figure out, like, how do we minimize that 2 hours between Iowa Cities?
Let me know when you figure it
How we gonna do
out.
that?
We've been trying to get Plains Angels going over there for 5 years.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of great things statewide. There's definitely a lot going on in Central Iowa, to your point. But
Talk about that infrastructure being in place, and that's what I think I was kind of trying to get to is if how long has the infrastructure been in place? I know there's multiple pieces to it, but to me it feels like a lot of these things are relatively new within the past decade-ish. And I don't know if those existed in other places.
I would say if you go back to 07, there really wasn't a whole lot.
Yeah. Because that's where I'm almost, I'm trying to get a sense of where we are in that life stage.
Sure.
And
It's
that's,
post-recession, would you say?
yeah, and I think that there have been pieces of it for a while,
Yeah.
and just other pieces bolt on that help extend the.
It's maturing. There's no doubt it's maturing.
Yeah.
because eventually you see the returns on that. And if other communities have had that infrastructure in place for a lot longer, it
So
would make sense.
look at Boulder, Colorado, who's got one of the best entrepreneurial businesses in the nation.
Highest density for sure.
Highest density
Yeah.
by far, Boulder, Colorado. And their idea of a plan is a 20-year plan that revolves, they do a 20-year plan every year. And they've been doing it for 20 years. And one of Brad Feld's, he's written a book about it, and one of his tenets is nobody over 40 in the group. And I had some of the 55, I agree. Don't ask the old people there, ask the younger people that are out building this stuff, have them run it, get in there and run it. And I think that you're seeing that here. You see a lot of people that are not the old guard running this stuff. I look at these user groups, that's not the old guard running it. That's great.
I feel bad, I have 2 more years to move on.
You're out too. Enjoy the old folks, sorry. We can bet them a little bit, Jeff.
Well, I think one thing we always do just to wrap it up and call it good is say, is there anything else we haven't, I know there is, anything we haven't talked about that would make it good for us to talk about another time and follow up on?
I didn't get a chance to answer the biggest issue thing, and it's something that I've thought about a lot that someone else identified to me. I think we really need to work on building the bench and building depth in our tech community. So I have a friend who moved to a larger market. He had run 2 startups in Iowa. And he basically said, I'm the smartest, most experienced guy in every room I go to in Iowa. I have to go to a bigger market so I can keep learning. It's not that I wanted to leave Iowa, it's just that everybody was coming to me and learning from me, and there was nobody left for me to learn from, so I had to move on. So I think about, you said talent, I think there's capital often gets brought up in that conversation, but this depth thing is really interesting to me, and where do we kind of build that in the kind of startup community? You know, we need 50 Ben Milnes and Matt Rezais and Dan Murrays, and those people running around the state that we can all learn from, but they also need somebody that they can learn from here too.
Well, I mean, when you talk about putting together tech panel, there's a lot of people in the one we could bring to this, but when you think about it, there's a few key people that you can turn to. So thank you, of course. But I think that is interesting. If the same people are always speaking on the panels and the same people are being brought in to mentor and teach, it would be exhausting.
Sure.
I think we're just getting to critical mass in the ecosystem, just barely. And I think to Jeff's point, when the ecosystem triples in size, you'll start to see some of that density. And it's part of why you go to an accelerator to get some of that by nature, the compressed mode. But I think something to look at another time is, I think we're very nascent. I think we're very innocent as a group, and we are not. Some of these big startup communities, we don't have the 50 years in, and we should engage that. That's fine. So what's the next step look like? What's the next 5 years look like? And we have to figure out how we pay for it. I mean, there's always that question. It's much easier, as Brian knows, when his board said, "Hey, Brian, let's do this." It's like there's a check due to make it happen, and that's not always as easy for the board to get past. We all have boards, and that's part of it. It is a continuing investment. I think it's paying benefits, but I think it's a continuing investment.
You see a greater willingness from some of the established businesses to invest in different ideas or something, even if it's as small as doing events and things like that.
I definitely think it's getting better, yeah.
I think a few years ago, it was definitely like there was, the established businesses and the startups, and there's kind of arm's length between them. I feel like that's gotten away a lot, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think your event actually is one, the charity hackathon is a place where we really see those two mixed in.
Yeah, that's a really good place for it too. And I was going to mention another opportunity that we bring for the software community, a yearly event that we put on from the Agile Iowa user group, which is focused on helping people understand how to build the products, right? How to be more effective at building your products and some of the technical practices involved in that. We host an event, once a year where we bring in speakers from across the nation, like people who are out speaking and advocating for this type of practice. We bring them into Des Moines, and then we balance out our program with local speakers. And so we do a really nice job of bringing, so you're not the smartest person in the room, or bring some people in so that you can learn from others in your national network or your worldwide network, to learn new ideas, to figure out how better ways to build software. And so that's another opportunity where we put an event on and we're able to reach 400 people in this community, and they walk away inspired that they learned something, or they learned a new technique, or they made a new connection. Also, the speakers we bring into Des Moines, we get a chance to show them what the area is like here too.
Well, I want to thank you guys again for participating today. And thank you again, of course, for watching. My name is Chris Ganowski. Again, I'm the editor and peer review and senior staff writer. Our best story ideas, when we're looking for articles for the Business Record, always come from our readers and the people that are watching. So if something today spurred a thought or an idea for you, or you saw a challenge or an issue or something that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to reach out our way. Our contact information is going to be up on the screen. Again, our best story ideas always come from our audience, so feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again, and have a nice day.